Have you ever wondered what would happen if an elderly man dressed in tattered clothes walked into a luxurious car dealership and was dismissed just because of how he looked? Would he quietly walk away, or would he unleash a storm that would shake the very foundation of that place? Today, I'm going to tell you the story of Samuel Carter, a name no one cared about at first, but within just 24 hours he turned an entire car dealership upside down with a secret so shocking it'll leave you speechless. This isn't just a tale of revenge. It's a powerful lesson about the true value of a person. Are you ready to uncover the mystery behind his worn-out coat and scuffed shoes? Join me on this emotional roller coaster journey because the ending will keep you glued to your screen. Samuel Carter was a 72-year-old man living in the quiet suburbs of Chicago, USA. To anyone passing by, he was just another elderly neighbor, a man who shuffled along in an old, faded coat, scuffed shoes, and a weathered hat that had seen better days. He lived in a modest two-bedroom house with peeling paint on the exterior, a small garden he tended to daily, and a rusty mailbox that creaked every time he opened it. But beneath this unassuming facade was a mind as sharp as a tack and a fortune that could rival some of the biggest names in the city. Samuel wasn't always this way, though. His story began decades ago in the gritty industrial neighborhoods of 1960s Detroit, where he grew up in a working-class family watching his father toil in a factory for meager wages. That upbringing instilled in him a deep respect for hard work and a disdain for superficiality. In the 1980s, during the real estate boom in America, Samuel saw an opportunity where others saw risk. He started small, buying rundown properties in overlooked neighborhoods, fixing them up and selling them for a profit. Over the years, through sheer grit and uncanny business acumen, he built an empire worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Yet, despite his wealth, Samuel never moved to a mansion or flaunted his success. He stayed in his small house, brewed his own coffee every morning in a chipped mug, and drove a 15-year-old Ford that rattled with every turn. For him, wealth wasn't about flashy cars or designer suits. It was about security, freedom, and the ability to live life on his own terms. But even a man as grounded as Samuel had his limits. On a bitterly cold winter afternoon in 2023, with the wind howling through the streets of Chicago and snow dusting the sidewalks, Samuel decided it was time to replace his old car. The Ford had been reliable for over a decade, but its engine sputtered more often than not, and the heater barely worked anymore. He didn't need anything extravagant, just a dependable vehicle to get him to the local market or the community center where he volunteered twice a week. After some research, he settled on visiting a high-end car dealership in downtown Chicago, not because he craved luxury, but because a friend had mentioned they stocked durable, long-lasting models with excellent after-sales service. Dressed in his usual attire, a threadbare coat that had been patched up one too many times, a pair of worn-out leather shoes, and a scarf his late wife had knitted for him decades ago, Samuel stepped out of his creaky Ford and made his way to the dealership. The building was a marvel of modern architecture, with towering glass walls, polished marble floors, and rows of gleaming cars that sparkled under the showroom lights. As he pushed open the heavy glass doors, a wave of warm air greeted him, a stark contrast to the biting cold outside. But the warmth stopped there. The moment he entered, he felt the weight of judgmental eyes on him. The sales staff, dressed in impeccably tailored suits with polished shoes and fake practiced smiles, barely acknowledged his presence. They flitted between customers who looked the part, young professionals in designer outfits, couples dripping with confidence and expensive accessories, and businessmen barking orders into their phones. Samuel, with his stooped posture and modest appearance, was invisible to them. A young salesman named Jake, with slicked-back hair, a flashy gold watch, and an air of arrogance, caught Samuel's eye for a fleeting moment. But instead of approaching, Jake leaned over to a colleague, a woman with a tight bun and a clipboard, and whispered just loud enough for Samuel to hear, Another old-timer here to waste our time. Probably can't even afford the floor mats. The woman snickered, casting a dismissive glance in Samuel's direction before returning to her paperwork. Samuel felt a pang in his chest, not of anger, but of disappointment. He had faced judgment before as a young man from a poor family trying to break into the cutthroat world of real estate. He'd been laughed out of boardrooms and turned away from banks, but he thought society had moved past such shallow biases. Apparently, he was wrong. Ignoring the whispers, he shuffled through the showroom, his eyes lingering on a sleek black sedan with a price tag that, to him, was pocket change. He ran his weathered hand over the polished hood, imagining the smooth ride, the quiet hum of the engine, and the comfort of a car that didn't groan with every mile. He stood there for nearly 40 minutes, waiting for anyone to offer assistance. But no one came. The staff buzzed around younger, flashier customers, their laughter and animated conversations echoing through the showroom, while Samuel stood alone, a ghost in their world. Finally, with a sigh, he approached the reception desk, where 3 employees, Jake included, were engrossed in a discussion about their upcoming weekend plans. Clearing his throat, Samuel spoke in a calm, polite tone, his voice carrying the weight of years. "Excuse me, I'd like to ask about the black sedan over there. Could someone help me?" Jake didn't even look up from his phone, scrolling through social media with a smirk. "We're pretty swamped right now," he said dismissively. "Why don't you come back another day?" Another employee, a man with a gelled mustache, chuckled under his breath. "Yeah, maybe when you've got a better budget." The third, the woman with the clipboard, didn't even bother to hide her eye roll as she turned away. Samuel's face remained impassive, but inside, a storm was brewing. He wasn't upset about being turned away from buying a car. He could buy a dozen if he wanted. What stung was the blatant disrespect, the assumption that his worth as a person was tied to the clothes on his back or the car he drove. This wasn't just about him. It was about every person who had ever been judged unfairly, dismissed for not fitting society's narrow mold. In that moment, as he turned to leave, the cold air hitting his face once more, Samuel made a decision. He wouldn't let this slide, not this time. As the sun dipped below the horizon and the city of Chicago lit up with the glow of streetlights, Samuel Carter sat in his dimly lit living room, a chipped mug of black coffee in his hand. The house was quiet, save for the faint tick of an old clock on the wall, a relic from his early married days. He hadn't slept a wink. His mind was racing, not with anger, but with a calculated resolve that had carried him through decades of challenges. He'd been underestimated before, countless times, and each time he'd turned that doubt into fuel. Tonight would be no different. What the staff at the dealership didn't know was that Samuel wasn't just an old man with a worn-out coat. He was a titan in the shadows, a man whose network of influence stretched across the country, from Wall Street boardrooms to Silicon Valley startups. He pulled out an ancient Rolodex from a drawer, a relic in the age of smartphones, but one he trusted more than any app. Flipping through the yellowed cards, he found the number of an old friend, Marcus Reed, a venture capitalist in New York who owed Samuel a favor from a deal they'd struck in the 90s. Marcus picked up on the second ring, his voice booming with familiarity. "Sam, you old fox, it's been ages. What's got you calling at this hour?" Samuel didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Marcus, I need intel on a car dealership chain in Chicago, Elite Motors. Who owns it, what's their financial standing, and how fast can it be acquired?" Marcus, sensing the steel in Samuel's tone, didn't ask questions. "Give me a few hours. I'll get back to you." While waiting, Samuel dialed another contact, Evelyn Harper, a sharp-witted financial advisor who had helped him navigate complex acquisitions in the past. "Evelyn, I'm looking to buy a business. I need liquidity and legal paperwork ready by dawn. Can you handle it?" Evelyn, accustomed to Samuel's no-nonsense approach, replied with a chuckle, "For you, Sam, I'll move mountains. Send me the details." By midnight, Marcus called back with a full dossier on Elite Motors. The dealership was a subsidiary of a larger conglomerate struggling with debt after a series of bad investments. Their asking price for the Chicago branch was steep, $15 million, but well within Samuel's reach. More importantly, they were desperate for a quick sale to shore up their finances. Over the next few hours, Samuel, Marcus, and Evelyn worked like a well-oiled machine. Phone calls flew back and forth, numbers were crunched, and offers were drafted. By 4 a.m., with the first hints of dawn creeping over the horizon, Samuel had wired the funds through a discreet offshore account, and the legal team had finalized the acquisition papers. The deal was done. Elite Motors Chicago dealership was his. He leaned back in his creaky armchair, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. The staff who had dismissed him as a nobody were about to learn a lesson they'd never forget. At 9 a.m. sharp, Samuel pulled up to the dealership in his rattling old Ford, the engine coughing as he parked in the same spot as the day before. He stepped out, wearing the same threadbare coat, scuffed shoes, and knitted scarf, a thick manila envelope of documents tucked under his arm. The showroom was already buzzing with activity, sales staff schmoozing with well-dressed clients, the air filled with the scent of new leather and the hum of polished engines. Jake, the slick-haired salesman who had brushed him off, was in the middle of a loud conversation with a client, gesturing animatedly at a sports car. He didn't even notice Samuel walk in. Neither did the woman with the clipboard who was now tapping away at a tablet, nor the man with the gelled mustache who was sipping coffee by the reception desk. Samuel didn't linger in the showroom this time. With a steady gait, he made his way to the manager's office at the back, where a brass nameplate read, "Richard Holloway, General Manager." Richard, a middle-aged man with a receding hairline and a penchant for loud ties, was on a phone call, his feet propped up on the desk. He glanced up as Samuel entered, his brow furrowing in mild annoyance at the interruption. "Sir, can I help you?" he asked, his tone dripping with forced politeness as he set the phone down. Samuel didn't respond immediately. Instead, he placed the manila envelope on the desk with a deliberate thud, the sound cutting through the silence of the office. Richard's curiosity turned to confusion as he opened the envelope and pulled out the stack of papers. His eyes scanned the first page, a signed acquisition agreement, and his face drained of color. What is this?" he stammered, flipping through the documents with trembling hands. Samuel stood tall, his gaze unwavering, his voice calm but laced with an undeniable authority. "I'm not here to buy a car, Richard. I'm here to inform you that as of 5 a.m. this morning, I am the new owner of this dealership." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Richard's jaw dropped, his mind racing to process what he'd just heard. This has to be a mistake," he muttered, his voice cracking. "You can't just buy a dealership overnight." Samuel tilted his head slightly, a flicker of amusement in his eyes. "I can, and I did. I acquired Elite Motors Chicago for $15 million. The paperwork is airtight, and the board has already approved the transfer. I suggest you read it carefully." Richard's hands shook as he fumbled through the pages, sweat beading on his forehead. Outside the glass walls of the office, a few staff members began to notice the tension, their curious glances darting toward the scene unfolding. Samuel didn't wait for Richard to regain his composure. "I came here yesterday as a customer," he continued, his tone measured but piercing. "I stood in your showroom for nearly an hour, interested in purchasing a vehicle, but I was ignored, dismissed, and mocked, all because of how I look. That kind of behavior ends today, not just for me, but for every single person who walks through those doors." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in, then added, "I've seen the financial reports. This dealership is profitable, but its culture is rotten. Under your leadership, Richard, arrogance and prejudice have been allowed to fester. I'm not pleased, and I'm not here to play games. I'm taking over, effective immediately." Richard, still reeling, tried to muster a defense. "Sir, I don't know what happened yesterday, but I assure you we value all our customers. If there was a misunderstanding, personally, Samuel cut him off with a raised hand. "There was no misunderstanding. I experienced firsthand the toxic environment you've cultivated, and I'm not interested in excuses. I'm interested in change." Without waiting for a response, Samuel turned toward the door and called out in a voice that carried through the showroom, "All staff, please gather in the meeting room, now." The urgency in his tone left no room for debate. One by one, the employees filed in, their expressions a mix of confusion and unease. Jake, who had been mid-pitch with a client, reluctantly joined the group, his smirk replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. The woman with the clipboard whispered to a colleague, "What's going on? Who's this guy?" The man with the gelled mustache shrugged, but his usual cockiness was gone. Once everyone was assembled, Samuel stood at the head of the room, his modest appearance starkly contrasting with the polished surroundings. Yet when he spoke, his presence commanded absolute attention. "Yesterday I came here as a customer," he began, his voice steady and resonant. "I wasn't greeted, I wasn't respected, I was treated as if I had no right to be here simply because of my clothes and my age. You assumed I couldn't afford a car, that I wasn't worth your time. You were wrong. As of this morning, I own this dealership. And starting now, things are going to change." A murmur rippled through the room, shock and disbelief etched on every face. Jake shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting to the floor. Samuel continued, "This dealership will operate on one principle. Every customer deserves respect, no matter who they are, what they wear, or where they come from. If you can't uphold that, you have no place here." He turned to Richard, who stood pale and silent at the edge of the room. "Richard, your leadership has failed to instill the values I expect. You're fired, effective immediately." The room fell deathly quiet. Richard's face contorted in disbelief. "Fired? You can't be serious. I've run this place for 10 years. Samuel's expression didn't waver. "I'm very serious. Your tenure fostered a culture of exclusion, and that ends now. Pack your things." Turning to the staff, he called out specific names, his memory sharp as ever. "Jake Thompson, Sarah Klein, and Michael Reed. You three were among those who dismissed me yesterday. Your attitudes have no place in my vision for this dealership. You're also terminated. Leave by the end of the day." Jake opened his mouth to protest, but the look in Samuel's eyes silenced him. The weight of the moment was palpable. A humble old man in a worn coat had just dismantled the hierarchy of an entire business in mere minutes. As the dismissed employees shuffled out, heads bowed, the remaining staff exchanged nervous glances, unsure of what would come next. Samuel wasn't done, though. He had a vision, and he intended to see it through. But Samuel Carter wasn't a man driven by vengeance. His goal wasn't to punish for the sake of punishment. It was to rebuild, to create something better. With the toxic elements removed, he turned his attention to those who remained. Among the staff was a young woman named Emily, a 25-year-old who worked in the cleaning department. She wasn't a salesperson, wasn't even supposed to interact with customers. But yesterday, as Mule stood alone by the sedan, she had offered him a small, genuine smile and a quiet, "Good afternoon, sir." It was a fleeting moment, but to Samuel, it spoke volumes about her character. "Emily Rivera," Samuel called out, his voice softer now, but still carrying an undeniable weight. Emily, who had been standing nervously at the back of the meeting room, froze, her eyes widening in surprise. She stepped forward hesitantly, clutching a rag in her hands, her uniform slightly wrinkled from a morning of hard work. "Yes, sir," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Samuel looked at her with a warmth that contrasted sharply with the sternness he'd shown moments before. "Yesterday, while others ignored me or mocked me, you showed kindness. It was a small gesture, but it meant something. I believe that kindness is the foundation of any good business. Starting today, you will be the new manager of this dealership. I trust you will lead with fairness and respect." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Emily's knees nearly buckled under the weight of the announcement, but "But sir," she stammered, her voice trembling, "I'm just a cleaner. I don't know anything about managing a dealership. I've never even sold a car." Samuel's expression softened further, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Experience can be taught, Emily. Kindness cannot. I've seen enough in my life to know that a good heart is worth more than a polished resume. You'll have my support, and I'll ensure you get the training you need. I believe in you." Emily stood there, tears welling up in her eyes, overwhelmed by the unexpected turn her life had taken. The other staff members exchanged looks of astonishment, some with skepticism, others with a newfound respect for the man standing before them. Samuel didn't stop there. Over the next few hours, he laid out his vision for the dealership. He announced plans for mandatory customer service training, emphasizing that every person who walked through the doors, whether they were there to buy a car or just to ask a question, deserved to be treated with dignity. He also introduced a policy of transparency, ensuring that no customer would be judged based on appearance, background, or financial status. In the weeks that followed, the transformation at Elite Motors Chicago was nothing short of remarkable. Samuel, though the owner, didn't micromanage. He trusted Emily to take the reins, guiding her with advice when needed, but giving her the freedom to grow into her role. True to his word, he arranged for top-tier business consultants to mentor her, teaching her the ins and outs of dealership management. Emily, initially overwhelmed, proved to be a quick learner, her natural empathy shining through in every decision she made. Under her leadership, the dealership began hiring new staff, based not just on sales skills, but on their ability to connect with people. The toxic culture of arrogance was replaced with one of genuine care. Sales numbers, surprisingly, didn't dip during the transition. In fact, they soared. Word spread quickly through Chicago about the dealership that treated everyone like family. Customers who had once felt intimidated by the high-end environment now walked in with confidence, knowing they wouldn't be judged. One story, in particular, captured the community's heart a few months later. A homeless man named Carl, weathered by years on the streets, wandered into the dealership one rainy afternoon, seeking shelter from a downpour. His clothes were tattered, his face lined with hardship, and he carried a small, worn backpack that held all his belongings. In the past, he would have been shooed away without a second thought, but under Emily's management, things were different. Instead of turning him away, Emily approached Carl with a warm smile. "Come on in, sir," she said gently, guiding him to a seat near the reception area. She handed him a cup of hot coffee from the staff break room and sat with him for a few minutes, asking if he was okay and if he needed anything. Carl, unaccustomed to such kindness, hesitated at first but soon opened up. He shared that he had once been a mechanic, working on cars just like the ones in the showroom, before a string of misfortunes, a lost job, a family tragedy, and health issues left him on the streets. Emily listened intently, not out of obligation, but because she genuinely cared. Before he left, she packed him a small bag of snacks from the staff pantry and gave him information about a local shelter that could help. A customer who witnessed the interaction was so moved that they posted about it on social media. The story went viral with thousands of shares and comments praising the dealership for its humanity. "This is what business should be about," one comment read, "not just profit, but people." The post brought even more attention to Elite Motors, turning it into a local symbol of compassion and earning Samuel quiet satisfaction from the sidelines. Samuel Carter never sought the spotlight. Even as Elite Motors Chicago became a beacon of change in the community, he remained in the background, still driving his old, rattling Ford and tending to his small garden in the suburbs. He didn't need a fancy car or a corner office to feel accomplished. For him, the true victory was seeing a place that once dismissed him transform into a haven of respect and kindness. Changing the dealership wasn't about proving a point or exacting revenge. It was about reminding everyone that a person's worth isn't measured by their clothes, their car, or their bank account, but by how they treat others. Samuel's story also shines a light on a pervasive issue in modern American society and indeed in many parts of the world. According to a 2022 study by Harvard University, over 60% of Americans have experienced discrimination based on appearance or perceived social status at some point in their lives. Whether it's being ignored in a store, overlooked for a job, or treated with disdain in public spaces, these microaggressions create invisible barriers that divide communities. Samuel tore down those barriers, not with grand gestures or public declarations, but with quiet determination and an unwavering belief in doing what's right. His actions at the dealership became a ripple effect, inspiring customers, staff, and even other businesses in Chicago to rethink how they interact with the people around them. So what can we take away from Samuel's journey? It's simple, yet profound. Every person you meet has a story, a value that goes beyond what you see on the surface. Don't rush to judge someone based on their appearance, their age, or the assumptions you've been conditioned to make. A kind word, a moment of patience, or just a willingness to listen can change someone's day and sometimes their life. Imagine if we all took a page from Samuel's book, choosing respect over prejudice, empathy over arrogance. What kind of world could we build together? I want to leave you with a question. Have you ever been judged unfairly because of how you look or where you come from? Or perhaps, have you ever caught yourself making snap judgments about someone else? Take a moment to reflect on that. If Samuel's story has touched you, please share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your experiences and what this story means to you. And if you found value in this video, don't forget to leave a like and share it with your friends and family. Let's spread the message of kindness far and wide. Lastly, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next inspiring story. Together, we can remind the world that everyone deserves a seat at the table.